Okay, there are notes on the table back there if you haven't obtained them already. And we're in Daniel chapter 7 this week. So we could have done this at the end of chapter 5, or would have also been appropriate at chapter 6 as well. But that was to discuss a little bit about the identity of Darius the Mede. And this is somewhat of an issue, is still kind of an issue in the interpretation of the book of Daniel. Because once again, we come up, have this kind of conflict, if you will, between what the biblical text says and what archaeological evidence seems to indicate. And so archaeologically, it has been argued that there really isn't any reference to Darius the Mede. And I point out there in the notes that Darius the Mede is not to be confused with Darius the First, or the Great, Hystaspes, who followed after Cyrus, okay? So that Darius the First was a different Darius than Darius the Mede that Daniel talks about. But anyhow, there's this problem of a lack of extra biblical sources that recognize or mention a Median king named Darius that took over Babylon after the fall of the city in 539 BC. But there are some sources, Greek sources, such as Berosus and Hypocration. Cuneiform inscriptions from that time period indicate that Cyrus the Great was the immediate successor of Nabonidus. Remember, Nabonidus was king of Babylon, and his son Belshazzar basically reigned or ruled from the city of Babylon, while his father Nabonidus was spending most of his time in Tema in Arabia. And let's see, going back here to the notes then, so the cuneiform inscriptions from that time period would indicate that Cyrus the Great was the immediate successor then to Nabonidus and Belshazzar. There are two Greek historical sources, Xenophon and Herodotus, that seem to contradict each other on certain historical points about this time period. And so what it all comes down to is at least four possibilities as to who Darius the Mede was, okay? One view is that Darius the Mede, that Darius itself is what they would call a titular title, okay? It's a title, not a name. And that person was actually a Gubaru, who was governor of Babylon in the region of beyond the river, who lived to about 525 BC. Second position is that Darius the Mede was Gobryas or Ugbaru, who was governor of Gutium in the Babylonian Empire, who defected to Cyrus and who captured Babylon for Cyrus. This person, however, died about 3 weeks after the capture of the city. Well, we find out from Daniel that this Darius the Mede, as soon as he came into power in Babylon, he reorganized the entire empire. Well, it seems kind of improbable that he could have done that in a 3-week period. So this second view here doesn't seem to get a lot of traction. Then there's that Darius, the third view, Darius the Mede, was simply an alternate or titular title for Cyrus the Great. If that's the case, then we would have to take Daniel 6:28 and retranslate it to read something like, so this Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius, namely the reign of Cyrus the Persian. And so that's a possibility within the Aramaic text there, but personally I don't consider it a strong possibility. And then the fourth view was presented, Charles told me about this, a doctoral thesis written by Stephen D. Anderson and copyrighted in 2014, asserts that Xenophon's historical version comes closest to agreeing with Daniel's. He goes on to submit that Cyrus did not obtain full and absolute power over the Medo-Persian Empire until about 2 years after the fall of Babylon. In that intervening time then, Darius the Mede, who Anderson also identifies with Cyaxares II by Xenophon, was indeed a Median king who reigned as head over the Medo-Persian Confederation at the time of Babylon's fall, and that Cyrus was his co-regent, and Cyrus was the hereditary king of the realm of Persia, the crown prince of Media, the commander of the Medo-Persian army. Yet it was Darius who was officially recognized as the highest power of the realm for about a 2-year period, okay? And then Cyaxares dies in 537 BC. We know that, okay? And that gave Cyrus full control of the empire. So that's Stephen Anderson's position on this. And what Charles showed me is an entire book on the subject, which I didn't have time to read all of by any means. But it seems to be a very cogent case then, an explanation for who Darius the Mede is. So anyhow, in chapter 7, we go through all that, and now in chapter 7 we're backtracking, right? In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon. When was it the first year of Belshazzar's reign in Babylon? Well, that dates back to, we believe, about 553 BC. So this vision that Daniel's going to tell us about is backing up as far as the chronology of the book of Daniel is concerned. So let's read about this dream here. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel saw a dream and visions in his mind as he lay on his bed. Then he wrote the dream down and related the following summary of it. Daniel said, I was looking in my vision by night, and behold, the 4 winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea, and 4 great beasts were coming up from the sea, different from one another. The first was like a lion and had the wings of an eagle. I kept looking until its wings were plucked, and it was lifted up from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a man. A human mind also was given to it. And behold, another beast, the second one, resembling a bear, and it was raised up on one side, and 3 ribs were in its mouth between its teeth. And thus they said to it, Arise, devour much meat. After this I kept looking, and behold, another one, like a leopard, which had on his back 4 wings of a bird. The beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. And after this I kept looking in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrifying, extremely strong, and it had large iron teeth. It devoured and crushed and trampled down the remainder with its feet, and it was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. And while I was contemplating the horns, behold, another horn, a little one, came up among them, and 3 of the first horns were pulled out by the roots before it. And behold, this horn possessed eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth uttering great things or boast. I kept looking until thrones were set up, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His vesture was like white snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool. His throne was ablaze with flames. Its wheels were a burning fire. A river of fire was flowing and coming out from before him. Thousands upon thousands were attending him, and myriads upon myriads were standing before him. The court sat, and the books were opened. And then I kept looking because of the sound of the boastful words which the horn was speaking. I kept looking until the beast was slain, and its body was destroyed and given to the burning fire. As for the rest of the beasts, their dominion was taken away, but an extension of life was granted to them for an appointed period of time. I kept looking in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven, one like a son of man was coming. And he came up to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him. And to him was given dominion, glory, and a kingdom, that all the peoples, nations, and men of every language might serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which will not pass away, and his kingdom is one which will not be destroyed. And as for me, Daniel, my spirit was distressed within me, and the visions in my mind kept alarming me. And so we're going to stop right there for now, okay? So let's put yourself in Daniel's place, right? How would you respond to this? Have you ever had a dream even similar to this in any way? And what would be the word you might use for a dream like this today? Nightmare, right? Okay. Yeah, what Daniel sees really upsets him. Really, some aspects of it flat out terrify him, don't they? Yes. Especially that fourth beast. Well, and if you had a dream like this, what would be one of the first questions that would pop into your mind? Why did I eat what? Why did I eat those mushrooms? No, really, wouldn't one of the first things you'd be asking yourself is, what does this mean? Okay? Or does it mean anything? Yeah. Yeah, I hope they mean nothing to us. Well, one of the wonderful advantages we have is that in asking that question and seeking to understand this, Daniel receives an answer, okay? And so we have a great deal of interpretation provided for us of the meaning of this dream. And that's brings out a great scriptural principle, which is let Scripture interpret Scripture, okay? So in going through this, we first want to allow the interpretation provided to Daniel. We want that to govern the interpretation of the dream. So that's using the immediate context. And then there are other places outside of the context of the book of Daniel that will notice similarities, strong similarities, that maybe help add to our understanding of what it is that Daniel is seeing here. And one of those strong similarities is in chapter 2, in the image, when you get down to the feet, what's one of the things pointed out about the feet? How many toes? 10 toes, and they're a mixture of iron and clay, okay? And then we get here into chapter 7, and instead of a human image, we have these images of various animals or beasts, okay? And this time with the fourth beast, we have 10 what? Horns, okay? And then we get all the way over into the book of Revelation, which was written when? We say, well, yeah, round date about 90 A.D., so several centuries after what Daniel has written here, okay? And one of the themes that shows up in the book of Revelation is the same 10 horns again, and the one little horn that subdues 3 of those horns. And so John is writing that as though it is future. He anticipates that as being future from his time. So that gives us maybe a little bit of a clue as to how to interpret and how to plot all of this on a timeline, all of this prophetic material here. Okay? Let's go back here a little bit. So, at verse 2, Daniel says, I was looking in my vision by night, and behold, the 4 winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea there. The winds of heaven, when the wind blows across the ocean, what does it do? It stirs it up. It creates waves, okay? And the stronger the wind, what happens then to the waves? The waves get stronger. They get bigger, okay? Straits of Magellan are known for these constant winds and the great waves that are kicked up by all of that. So what do you think the imagery is here? 4 winds of heaven stirring up the great sea. How would you take that? Do we have any basis for looking or interpreting this? What's that?
When you say the 4 winds of heaven, the Indians called the tornado the 4 winds. It was like 4 winds at once. And
Okay. Okay? Something terrific like a tornado. Four winds. What do you think of in direction there? Four winds. North, south, east, west. Doesn't that indicate comprehensive wind like Ed is suggesting here? Winds coming from all of these directions, and the great sea. What about the great sea? Basically, where do all these beasts come out of? They come out of the sea, all right? These beasts represent what? We're told. That's part of the interpretation coming up here. They represent kings and their kingdoms, okay? So if they represent kings and kingdoms and they're coming up out of the great sea, I would take the sea as representing at least humanity, okay? And maybe we could emphasize more fallen humanity. What we're going to see here really is the course of the Gentiles. We talked a few weeks ago about the times of the Gentiles. Well, what we have here is kind of an outline, a map of that period. And by the way, I'll try to re-emphasize again here. I said that chapter 2 is kind of like a very important chapter prophetically. Well, chapter 7 is pretty much in a different way, but still the same material as what we saw in chapter 2, but presented in a different manner. Okay? In chapter 2, those courses of the four world empires are represented by human figures. So it's kind of looking at those empires from the human viewpoint, from man's viewpoint. When we get to chapter 7, the viewpoint, I think, is more of a heavenly one, looking down on what's happening here on earth. Okay, so there's four great beasts coming up from the sea, different from one another. The first was like a lion, had the wings of an eagle. I kept looking until its wings were plucked and it was lifted up from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a man. The human mind was also given to it. Now, when we get over into the interpretation, there's really not much said, really nothing said about this first beast as far as interpretation. Why might that be? If this corresponds back to the image of chapter 2, why might that be? Well, actually, at the time Daniel has this dream, it hasn't gone yet. This is about 553 BC. Babylon's going to fall in 539, okay? But we're still in the midst of Babylon. According to this chapter 2, Babylon is what? Nebuchadnezzar and Babylon. They're the head of gold, okay? So what Daniel is seeing here right now in this dream, this is concurrent with that. And so I don't think he finds that as an issue that he wants to dwell on, okay, because it's obvious what Babylon is, all right? It's obvious what this first beast is. The first, it looks like a lion. What's the symbolism of a lion? What's that? Powerful, yes, yeah. Lions have been frequently used in various cultures to symbolize power, sovereignty, ferociousness, right? And it had wings of an eagle. So when a lion is a mammal, it's a land-based animal, okay? An eagle is what? It's a bird. And from our perspective, human perspective, what don't we usually think of an eagle as kind of the shall I say, the king or the lion of the birds? It's a carnivore, right? It's swift, all right? It's powerful as well, right? You get the imagery here, right? But the wings are plucked from it, which would then render it what? I mean, it's still a lion, okay, but...
Well, it kind of means he's staying there.
Okay, yeah, he's not going anywhere. That might be one way of looking at it, okay? And it was lifted up from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a man. A human mind was also given to it. And it's thought, I think, by a lot of conservative interpreters that that's an allusion to what happened with Nebuchadnezzar. Okay. All right, the second one. And behold, there was another beast, a second one, resembling a bear, and it was raised up on one side. And there were 3 ribs were in its mouth, between its teeth. And thus they said to it, arise, devour much meat. What do you think of when you think of a bear? Is a bear something you want to meet on your camping trip? Okay, why? He'll kill you, or he'll eat all your food. All right? Bears are omnivores. They'll pretty much eat anything they can get a hold of. And he doesn't care what you think. And Carrie and I, interestingly enough, had 2 bear encounters last summer. One of them, he got into our cooler and managed to run off with some uncooked chicken and some pieces of chocolate. So
So do the 3 ribs correspond to the 3 horns that are taken over in Revelation?
I personally would say I don't see from here a reason to cause them to correspond with that. A lot of, again, conservative interpreters, there is some debate about that. Let's see here, somewhere I had something about it.
You have the 3 ribs may represent the 3 major geographical components of this empire, which included Babylon.
Yeah. Okay. And there's others who divide it that differently, okay? And the fact that the bear is on his side, okay, what do we make of that? And some have suggested then that that indicates the dominance of the Persian aspect of the Medo-Persian Empire. What's the main point, though, to get out of this second beast here, the bear? The devouring, okay? Arise, devour much meat.
Tim, who's they?
Yeah, that's another good question, okay? Who are the they, right? And there's several times that Daniel makes reference to speaking with somebody or somebody speaking to him, okay? He never identifies.
An angel with him.
Yeah, he never identifies clearly for us. It could be an angel. It could be one of the saints in heaven that he keeps talking about, the holy ones, okay? It could be Christ.
Yeah, it could be that he's walking so close with God that he doesn't even identify him. It's just they. God, of course, it's God. It's God giving him this knowledge. Maybe that's what it is.
Yeah, whoever or whatever, he feels no need to identify it. Okay?
He knows who it is.
So, if he feels no need to identify who they is, or he, all right, then I would say we don't need to struggle with that. All right? All right. The third beast. After this I kept looking. Behold, another one, like a leopard, which had on his back 4 wings of a bird. Again, there's that same symbolism probably. The beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. Right? The third beast resembles a leopard. Compared to a lion, what do you think of when you think of a leopard being compared to a lion? Swift, yeah. A leopard is leaner, more swift, okay? Probably not as regarded as ferocious as a lion, but more cunning. Yeah, more cunning. So you have the 4 wings, again, probably symbolizing swiftness. And then the beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. Now, when we get to chapter 8, I think we're going to get more of an explanation of what this third beast is. And again, most conservative interpreters take this as referring to Alexander the Great and the empire that he establishes after subduing the Medo-Persian or the Persian Empire.
And then the four wings would be the four generals that took over after Alexander.
Yeah, so George is suggesting here that the four wings and or the four heads, or maybe both, represent the four generals that take over the empire of Alexander the Great after Alexander dies, we'll say, prematurely. All right.
It's interesting that he kept his wings, all four of them, and the lion didn't, so
When you consider the nature of the conquest of Alexander the Great, that was really an amazing feat of history, that he could conquer so much territory in so little time. And so that swiftness that was associated with him and his conquest remained with him until his death. And that might be part of the reasoning there. Okay? So within a matter of far less than a decade, actually, his empire stretched all the way from Greece all the way to the Indus River in India, and also occupied everything that we would call Arabia, Palestine, and even into northern Africa. Just an amazing act or feat of history. Okay, now we come to the seventh beast. After this, I kept looking in the night vision, and behold, a fourth beast, dreadful and terrifying and extremely strong, and it had large iron teeth. It devoured and crushed and trampled down the remainder with its feet. And it was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. Notice how Daniel never associates it with a particular animal. So I'd ask myself, why? Okay, and I think it's because what he sees here is so unusual. There is no equivalency in nature. Nothing that he can compare it to. It's worse than the worst of the beast, as Ed says. Okay? All right. And then, so what are the characteristics of this beast? Name them for me. He does what?
It crushes.
Okay, he crushes with his feet. Okay. Iron teeth that do what? Devour. Okay. All right. If this is a kingdom and ruled by a king, what does it indicate to us that this kingdom and the king are going to do? They're going to devour other kingdoms. Okay? Eliminate the enemy. Yes, eliminate anybody who won't bow, who won't cooperate. Then, let's see, it devoured, it crushed, it trampled down the remainder with its feet, and it was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. Now, the 10 horns, this is what grabs Daniel's attention here, right? So he keeps focusing on this. While I was contemplating the horns, the 10 horns, behold, another horn, a little one, came up among them, and 3 of the first horns were pulled out by the roots before it. And behold, this horn possessed eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth uttering great things, or my version says boast. Okay? Who might we identify this little horn with? Based on what you remember about Revelation. The Antichrist. Okay? So that becomes a theme that we see that continues in prophetic literature all the way into the book of Revelation. What does this one little horn do? It takes over 3 other horns. And what do these horns represent? Kings and their kingdoms. Okay? To be a king, you need to have a kingdom. Okay? All right? So this one little horn, by some means, manages to subdue Or literally, when I was looking at this in the Aramaic, it literally means to humble. He humbles them. So we don't know exactly how that's going to manifest itself, but throughout all four of these beasts here in these kingdoms, there's always this idea of dominion, authority, right? And with that authority, what makes that authority possible? Well, among all these Gentile kingdoms, it's always by means of conquest, military conquest. All right, so there's the 10 horns, the little horn that comes up among them. 3 of the first horns were pulled out by the roots before it. And behold, this horn possessed eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth uttering great boast. And this is part of why we get driven to the idea that this horn is not just a nation, but may actually represent an individual, because it has eyes like a man, and it utters great boast.
Well, he might, since the Antichrist comes in peace, he might flatter these guys in giving them what they want.
Yeah, we'll see how that part plays out. Judy's wondering if maybe part of the manipulation of the Antichrist initially is to use flattery, right? So now, here's the next question. As we're reading through this, and we get into verse 9, I kept looking until thrones were set up, and the Ancient of Days took a seat, etc. And at the end of verse 10, the court sat, the books were opened. As we're moving through the text here, would you come to the conclusion that these 4 beasts are simultaneous in history, or do they succeed each other in history?
Or they're at least, if not succeeding each other, it's a history, it's a future history.
Yeah.
It's a telling of the history of the future through time.
So it's still linear, right? And it's progressing through time.
There
Yeah.
may be gaps between them, though.
Okay. So the most natural reading of the text, what I'm driving at here, is that these are successive. Okay? Successive, not contemporaries. All right? And so when we get to the Ancient of Days and the pending judgment that's coming, and then in verse 13, and one like a son of man coming, and he came to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him, and to him was given dominion, glory, and a kingdom, that all the peoples, nations, and men of every language might serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which will not pass away, and his kingdom is one which will not be destroyed. Is that part of the same succession?
Yes and no. This is definitely a prediction of Christ.
Okay? We clearly see this as a prediction of Messiah.
Right. Who was and is and always will be, in a sense. So it's not a succession per se. But
Well, within the text, though, yeah,
this is his second coming, I guess.
yes. Okay. All right. So this is part of this succession. Okay. So what I want you to see is that if we follow the natural meaning of the text here, when we get to this 5th kingdom that's established by one like a Son of Man, Christ, okay, that ends, that's the culmination of all of these others. This is the end of history. We're skipping way down the line because we're still here, and this hasn't happened yet. And then part of the question is, when is it going to happen? Judy.
The beasts are obviously successive kingdoms, but the 10 kings, isn't that the Antichrist reign? They have the 10 kingdoms and their power over to him.
Okay, so now the other interesting question is the 10 horns, which represent 10 kings and their kingdoms. Okay? Are they successive or are they contemporaneous? When you read the text, what do you think?
They sound the same. They sound coexistent.
What's that?
They sound contemporaneous to me.
The 10 are all there together.
Okay, but when you get to 3, that are subdued by the one little horn, doesn't that almost require that all of that be somewhat contemporaneous? It's got to all happen during the time that that little horn is around.
Right,
At least it's the doing of the three. Yes.
the three are still there, it's just he has control over them.
Yes. Yeah. He gains control over them. I would suggest to you, okay, that the 10 horns are basically contemporaneous, right? And I think that kind of fits the image of the 10 toes going back to chapter 2, right? So the 10 horns are basically contemporaneous. 3 of those that exist at that time are subdued by the one little horn who we think is the Antichrist, okay? And so when it comes to, okay, so again, in premillennial thought, all right, this fourth beast where we see the 10 horns is believed to be the Roman Empire. But how did the Roman Empire end? As an empire, it's basically ended or been divided. Okay? But did it end with the glorious appearing of Messiah? No. Okay? That's the point here.
That we know for sure.
All right. So there have been various attempts to try to say, okay, well, maybe the 10 horns represent 10 Roman emperors. Okay? Well, there was way more than 10 of them. Some of them only lasted for a few months as far as their reigns were concerned. Some of them lasted for years. And there's really no case that we can look back on historically where we can clearly say, well, there was one of these horns, an additional one that shows up that subdues 3 of them, and there's no time in which there's 10 contemporaneous emperors of the Roman Empire. Okay, so what I'm getting at is that an attempt to take what we're seeing here as far as the 10 horns and trying to fit that back into history and say this has already happened is very difficult, if not impossible. And what you wind up with is everybody who tries to do that, they all wind up differing in their interpretations from each other. There's no consistency in the effort to do that. Okay? And it's really only the premillennial view who still places this out ahead of us, all right, that can in any way consistently explain what's going on with the text here. You follow me here? Okay. All right. All right, so let's see, what else we got here? We only got a few minutes left.
Well, just a side note, you know they divided the whole world up into 10 regions, right? They have maps already divided.
Yeah, again, we don't know exactly how that plays out, okay? That's one possibility. What we do know, 10 horns or 10 kings, okay? And they have kingdoms, all right? One popular interpretation is still, I think, used by some, is that's going to be the European Economic Community or Union, okay? Well, that never has seemed to grab traction.
Well, they divided it for a future, like all of North America is one.
Yeah. So another possibility is that the entire world is divided into 10 regions. Okay, again, there's nothing in the text that requires that. Okay, that's our imposition.
Whatever it is, it has yet to happen. One thing I was going to say, though, is that the Roman Empire, although gone, we have no doubt about that, a great deal of what the Roman Empire did is still in place in the way governments have been assembled since then.
Yes.
Especially throughout the West, but really now throughout the world.
Yeah.
So in a sense, it lives on.
So yeah. Okay. And conservative interpreters generally take that pathway there, that somehow or other Rome is either revived or is living on.
Yeah.
Okay?
And indeed, that's what Hitler called the Third Reich. What was the third one? Well, what was the first one? It was if I understand it correctly, it was the Roman Empire. The second one
Okay, and here's another interesting thing about Hitler and World War II. How many nations did Germany actually take over?
Probably 10.
9. In a sense, that's how close they got. Anyhow. So we got to wrap this up here. So look at the interpretation. Verse 16, I approached one of those who was standing by and began asking him the exact meaning of all this. So he told me and made known to me the interpretation of these things. These great beasts, which are 4 in number, are 4 kings who will arise from the earth. But the saints of the highest one will receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever for all ages to come. There is a 2-sentence outline of the entire course remaining of Gentile world history. All right? And it tells us how it's all going to end. And then verse 19, Daniel wants to know more about the 4th beast. And he talks about his teeth of iron, claws of bronze, devouring, crushing, trampling, the 10 horns, and all of that. And verse 21, key, I kept looking, and that horn, that little horn, was waging war with the saints and overpowering them until, that word is linear, okay, until the Ancient of Days, that's God, came and judgment was passed in favor of the saints of the highest one. That's Elyon, the highest one. And the time arrived when the saints took possession of the kingdom. And this time, it's the entire kingdom of the world ruled by the Son of Man. And thus he said, the 4th beast will be a 4th kingdom on earth, which will be different from all the other kingdoms and will devour the whole earth and tread it down and crush it. And as for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom 10 kings will arise, and another will arise after them, and he will be different from the previous ones and will subdue or humble 3 of the kings. He'll speak out against the Most High, basically blaspheme or speak against the Most High, wear down the saints, persecute them, and he'll intend to make alterations in times and in laws. I agree with Walvern on that what he'll try to do is what Antiochus Epiphanes did back around in the 160 BC time frame when he forced the Jews, he was told the Jews, you can't follow your customs, right? And that's possibly what will happen here. We got to close. And so I got one little application for you to think about here. The premillennial interpretation of all of this has a way of being rather negative. Things don't end well, or they don't progress very well, do they? Until what happens? Jesus comes. And it's Jesus in his conquest who subdues all of these others, who eliminates all these other powers and sets up that millennial kingdom, right? But as we march toward that time in history, generally premillennialism sees things as getting worse and worse. And don't you see that progression in the 4 beasts? When we get to the 4th one, he's different from all the others. He devours, he tramples, he crushes, okay? So there's all this negativism. You look at Paul in 2 Timothy, and he talks about in the last days, and he gives us all these characteristics of mankind in the last days. And it doesn't sound good, does it? All right? So the dispensational premillennial interpretation of Scripture is often critiqued by other Christians as encouraging a pessimistic view of human history and subsequently discouraging efforts to evangelize and also to be involved in world affairs, such as in politics or in the arts or whatever, okay? Any effort that would hold forth the possibility of helping to improve society, right? Through government, political efforts. What would you say if somebody said that to you?
Explain to me how that is God's will for my life on this earth now. That's what I'd say
Okay.
I don't see how that's God's will for my life on this earth as his ambassador. To stand back and go, gee, there's nothing I can do anyway, so shucks, it's going down.
Okay.
Who cares?
Right.
I don't see how those mesh.
Everybody hear what Ed is saying here? Yeah. Paul?
I mean, forget all the naysaying, it's the Great Commission. We're not told to hold off on that because things are getting worse.
Right.
Give you a break.
Yeah. Forget the naysaying. Paul is saying we have the Great Commission. That's our focus. All right? The pessimism that we see here should never take us away from that. Yeah, back here.
We all have gifts and talents, and they've been given to us by God to use. And sometimes we may feel like we don't have a gift and talent, but stepping out of the box and taking that risk is what God asks us to do.
Okay. Use your gifts. Take the risk. And can I add, trust the results to God. Okay? He's the one in charge of the program, not us. Okay? And I'll throw in one little practical one here. And that is, I'm concerned, like the rest of you, about what we see happening around us, about the course of this age, the course of this world. All right? I don't want to leave behind a mess for my grandkids. Is that a good practical reason? Right? Do what you can. Do good unto all men, especially unto those who are of the household of faith. That's what Paul says in Galatians. Ed?
Yeah, but we do what we can do, and the results are God's. I mean,
Yeah.
whatever happens, if our grandchildren end up with a messed up world, which it looks like they're gonna, well, they'll deal with that. That's their generation to deal with, just as we're dealing with the ramifications of previous generations' inventions of atom bombs and whatever else they did.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so it's not for us to be living our grandchildren's lives. Yes, leave them the best world we can, but we're to do what God would have us do in this world. And that's what our focus should be.
Yes.
Not what the impact of it is. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I'll finish on this, okay, and we got to close, which is very briefly, okay, God prepared us for our time. God is preparing them for their time. Okay, let's close. Thank you, Father, again, for the input of the class here and for the power of your word. And though we see frightening and terrible things, as Daniel did, it's all in your hands. And we trust the outcome to you while we continue to minister, to use our gifts, to evangelize, as you have called us to do. And so we just continue to ask for your blessing on our lives, your spirit to enable us and to complete your will for our lives in this time, in Jesus' name.